Most baseball fans remember Bert Blyleven as a Hall of Fame pitcher with incredible stats. But there's a darker story hidden behind those numbers. A story of crude gestures to fans, toxic behavior toward teammates, and questionable choices that would shock you. This is the side of Blyleven they don't want you to know about. Picture this: May 31st, 1976, Metropolitan Stadium. The home crowd is booing their own pitcher. And what does Blyleven do? He makes an obscene gesture, what newspapers called an arm signal that will never appear in the Boy Scouts manual. Then he tells reporters, "I couldn't care less about the fans." This wasn't just a bad day. This was who Bert Blyleven really was. But here's the real mystery. A pitcher with 287 wins and 3,701 strikeouts, fifth all-time, gets rejected by the Hall of Fame for 14 years. 14 years! Was it just his stats that bothered voters? Or was there something else? Something about his character that made people think twice. Stay with me as we dig into the real Bert Blyleven. The man behind the curveball had secrets that baseball tried to bury. Let's start with what everyone knows. Blyleven's career numbers look impressive on paper. 287 wins, 3,701 strikeouts, 60 shutouts. Those are Hall of Fame numbers, right? Well, not so fast. Here's what they don't tell you. Blyleven also lost 250 games. That's a lot of losing. His winning percentage was just .536, barely above average. For a guy who played 22 seasons, that's not exactly dominant. Critics called him a statistical accumulator. Translation? He just stuck around long enough to pile up numbers. He only won 20 games once in his entire career. Once. He never led the league in wins or ERA. He finished in the top 3 for Cy Young voting exactly twice in 22 seasons. Think about that. In over 2 decades of pitching, his own peers thought he was one of the best pitchers in baseball exactly twice. That's not Hall of Fame excellence. That's just longevity. But the numbers tell an even darker story. Blyleven earned the nickname Tough Luck Loser early in his career. Sounds sympathetic, right? Poor Bert just didn't get run support. But let's look deeper. In 1971, Blyleven went 16-15 despite being called the Twins' best pitcher. In 12 of those losses, his team scored 3 runs or fewer. But here's the thing. When you're constantly getting no run support, maybe the problem isn't just bad luck. Maybe teammates and managers lose faith in you for other reasons. This brings us to Blyleven's real issue, his personality. Multiple sources described his relationships with teammates, managers, and writers as prickly. That's baseball speak for difficult to work with. In his 20s, Blyleven was known as moody and petulant. He openly complained about managers, especially Chuck Tanner in Pittsburgh. Blyleven said, "It's tough pitching for Tanner. I'm a competitor. I don't like to be taken out of the game." But here's the reality. Good pitchers earn their manager's trust. They don't constantly complain about being pulled. The friction wasn't just with managers. Blyleven had salary disputes with Twins owner Calvin Griffith in 1974 that put his relationship with the front office in freefall despite getting a raise. This guy had a talent for burning bridges wherever he went. But the real dark side of Bert Blyleven came out in specific incidents that showed his true character. We already mentioned the obscene gesture to Twins fans in 1976. But that was just the beginning. After making that gesture, he was fined and ordered to make a public apology by AL President Lee MacPhail. The fact that league officials had to step in tells you everything about how bad this was. Then came 1980 and the Pittsburgh Pirates walkout. Blyleven literally quit on his team mid-season. He walked out after being pulled from a game and demanded a trade. His excuse? Non-support and lack of confidence from my manager. But his teammates were shocked by his departure. When your own teammates are surprised you quit, that says something about your character. The media vilified him as an entitled millionaire who symbolized everything wrong with skyrocketing salaries in professional sports. After he came back, he went on what he called a silence kick, refusing to do interviews. This is not how a team leader behaves. But perhaps the most disturbing incident happened in 1982. While injured, Blyleven coached a Little League team. During this time, he gave children chewing tobacco so they would look more like real pros. Let that sink in. A grown man gave tobacco to kids. In today's world, that would end a career instantly. These weren't isolated incidents. They were a pattern of poor judgment and selfishness that followed Blyleven throughout his career. Want to watch all the baseball action that Blyleven was part of? Platforms like FUBO make it easier than ever to stream every game live, so you never miss the drama unfolding on the field. But back to Blyleven's numbers. Even his supporters had to admit his stats came with major red flags. In 1986, he set a major league record by giving up 50 home runs in a single season. 50 and 96 home runs over 1985 to 86 combined. That's not just bad luck. That's a serious problem with your pitching. Sure, he still went 17-14 that year, but think about what that means. His team had to score constantly just to keep him competitive. That's not elite pitching, that's batting practice. The tough luck loser label wasn't just about run support either. When you consistently put your team in holes by giving up big innings, your offense stops trying as hard. It becomes a cycle where poor pitching creates poor offensive support. When Blyleven became eligible for the Hall of Fame in 1998, he got just 17.55% of the vote. The next year, it dropped to 14.1%. No player with such a low debut percentage had ever made the Hall since 1970. That should tell you something about how writers who covered him really felt. For years, the arguments against Blyleven were devastating. John Heyman, a prominent sports writer, pointed out that Blyleven didn't win all that many more games than he lost. He never finished higher than third in Cy Young voting and only made 2 All-Star teams in 22 seasons. For someone with his longevity, that's an embarrassingly low number. Critics noted that he was never considered among the 2 best pitchers in his league during his time. His own managers seemed to lack faith in him. As Heyman wrote, it wasn't just sports writers, it was his own managers who didn't appear to see him as one of the greats. The personality issues haunted him too. Writers weren't inclined to vote for a moody guy who flipped off fans. His prickly relationships came back to hurt him when it mattered most. Only when Sabermetrics became popular did Blyleven's case improve. Advanced stats like WAR tried to argue he was better than his record showed. But here's the problem with that argument. If you need complex formulas to prove someone was great, maybe they weren't actually that great. ESPN's Jason Stark said no player ever benefited more from the Sabermetrics boom than Blyleven. That's not a compliment. It's an admission that traditional evaluation methods found him lacking. It took 14 attempts before Blyleven finally got into the Hall in 2011 with 79.7% of the vote. Even then, he barely scraped by. Compare that to truly great pitchers who get in on the first ballot with 90% or more. After retirement, Blyleven tried to remake his image as a broadcaster. The "Circle Me Bert" phenomenon made him seem lovable and harmless. Suddenly, the guy who flipped off fans and walked out on teams was everyone's favorite grandfather figure. But this transformation feels calculated. It's easy to be charming when you're not competing anymore. The real Blyleven showed up during 22 years of playing, not 20 years of broadcasting. Even his broadcasting had issues. In 2006, he accidentally used profanity on air and got suspended for 5 games. Some habits never change. So what's the truth about Bert Blyleven? The numbers show a pitcher who accumulated stats through longevity rather than dominance. The incidents show a player with serious character flaws who repeatedly put himself above his team. His 14-year wait for the Hall of Fame wasn't just about statistics. It was about character. Writers who covered him knew what kind of person he really was. They saw the tantrums, the selfishness, and the poor judgment. Yes, Blyleven eventually made the Hall of Fame, but his legacy remains complicated. Should we judge players purely on numbers, or does character matter too? Blyleven's story forces us to confront that question. What do you think? Does great pitching excuse bad behavior? Or should the Hall of Fame represent more than just statistics? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more revealing sports stories that dig beneath the surface. And remember, if you want to catch all the baseball drama live, check out FUBO for the best streaming experience.